Imagine that this is a work of fiction, that none of this is real. Imagine that the people and the events my father wrote about don't exist outside of his peculiar madness, and if they seem familiar to you, it's only because he was a clever little thief, nothing more. Do that for me. It will help you sleep better at night. Editor's preface. My father's head was a noisy place, and most of what spilled out of it was messy. As his posthumous editor, I've spent years sifting through that mess, and I think I've done a fair job of honoring his memory and his work. As a daughter, I've also become my late father's apologist with mixed results. Neither occupation pays very well, and the emotional costs are abnormally high. The manuscripts I've collated here were a surprise. Raw, messy, and arguably unfinished musings, these are the snips my father wrote in between writing and doing other, more sensible things. This was my father in the darkness that followed my mother's death. I think the bulk of what I've titled Static was a kind of emotional exercise for him, which would explain why he buried it unceremoniously in an unmarked crate and never bothered to take it further. I imagine he forgot about it. I imagine its anticlimactic lack of an ending pissed him off. Cameron Pelletier was an emotive man, and he loathed anticlimaxes of any kind. The decision to pick up what he left behind and publish it, as is, wasn't made lightly, and was met with a great deal of resistance from his editor, agent, and publisher, who are afraid that it will do violence to his legacy. My father's catalog of long fiction, short stories, essays, and poetry has been well received, and it is the opinion of his literary peers that this fantastic confession might tarnish his public image as a storyteller. Maybe even their profits. Ultimately, my brother and I disagree, so here we are. I have interpolated fragments of my father's journal, his letters and articles, as well as a previously unpublished story that was most likely written and abandoned, at or around the same time as the larger text, because they seemed relevant. Beyond that, I haven't altered my father's words in any way. I've left them the way he left them, for better or for worse, because I don't understand them well enough to edit or reshape his prose. Static isn't a monologue, a proper confession, or a stream of consciousness, though it reads that way in places. There are scenes that feel like a screenplay when he was living, with dialogue I almost remember. My brother and I are characters, as are my late mother and grandfather. The house I grew up in is a character. Maine is a character. A dozen incidental names and places I recognize but can't contextualize are characters, and I can almost see him writing this mess. Around my brother, and I without us being aware. The year following my mother's death was a black hole that crushed details into a tiny oblivion. I had my own demons then. These words are the pieces of my father, his mind, his inner life, his secret self, that I never saw, never knew. These are stories he never shared, that he buried beneath the face I remember so well. I wonder if any child really knows their parent, and I wonder if that matters. I have memories and a photo reel in my mind's pocket labeled father. I have his identity on a chain around my neck like a locket. His gray eyes and growl are fixed in my mind like statuary, and I believe in that memory. I know that man. I know him well. Could be painful to slip behind the veil and see my father unmasked, but it is. As strange as it seems, his confession doesn't horrify me. From where I sit, I find his nudity comforting. Perhaps you'll find that odd. No matter. We are an odd family. The ugliness he kept hidden from us kids solidifies his shadow and reveals a man, a human animal who is more than my dad and less than a god. I don't necessarily like the man exposed, but I am glad to know him. There is comfort in knowing. Dad taught me that. My father wrote fantastic stories about ordinary people thrust into impossible situations, and it made him mildly famous. Those stories paid the bills. In the background of this public persona, my father was a complicated man who hid his complexity from his family because he was too busy loving us. And I never knew, never expected, never thought about it because, well, why would I? My father was a giant who braided my hair and let me dance on the top of his feet. My father was a benevolent giant. It isn't the job of an editor or a daughter to pass judgment on a man based solely on his words. It isn't the job of a curator to ascribe value to the artifacts placed in her care, and so I'm not going to. What we have here is a sacred, terrifying, and caustic confession that he never intended to share. He didn't write it for posterity, and I am not sharing it for glory. I am sharing it, against his dead will and the will of his peerage, because I love him. If these words cause you pain, if they deconstruct your image of my father, the writer, then you never did. Penelope Eftikia Pelletier, M.T. Desert, Maine, October 2062. From the Author's Journal, 2020. I cheered inwardly when the eponymous spider in Charlotte's Web died. 10 pages later, I shrieked, out loud this time, as I envisioned the nightmare horde of baby spiders flying off into the distance. The book, like so much of the media my neglected generation absorbed, had been a roller coaster of emotions that culminated in what could best be described as a horror movie in my mind. I was 9 years old, and already my arachnophobia defined me, had become a cyclopean cornerstone of my essential being. All other child terrors were lost in its immensity, drowned in its wake, forgotten in the creeping shadow of 8-legged horrors that were too ubiquitous to be ignored. My mother, an aspiring beldam at 34, took a perverse pleasure in provoking my terror. We lived in a shotgun trailer lost in the old-growth nowhere lands of the Allagash, northwest of Churchill Dam. According to my mother, we shared our wilderness with no less than 3 wicked spiders: the aggressive Lycosa or Maine wolf spider, the shy but deadly black widow, and the invasive and elusive brown recluse. The recluse wasn't native, and that made it worse somehow. It was an invader, a creeping, hiding, flesh-melting monster that lurked in silky oubliettes. It didn't matter that recluse sightings in Maine were apocryphal. My mother assured me that the legends were legit, and I believed her. Harridan or no, she was my mother. In the summer, my father would fish on Eagle Lake, launching his dory from an ancient common-law dock south of John's Bridge. The spiders walked on water there, jumping from the slow-rotting dark beneath the dock to scuttle like an honor guard around the launch. Their alien choreography terrified me into pissing myself when I was 6, and after that my father forgot to invite me along. I remember my mother shaking her head and clucking her tongue at me, but I know she was pleased. Sometimes I think she was a vampire, one that drank the reek and tremble of others' fears. Sometimes I think it made her fearless. I remember these things in broken French. We never spoke English at home, and that used to embarrass me. I didn't have friends until we moved to Wiscasset when I was in 4th grade. Allagash Elementary was 3 hours south, and my father didn't always have a truck, let alone the desire to make that kind of commute. Officially, my sister and I were homeschooled. Ostensibly, on paper, we were logged into the system somewhere in Augusta, but I remember the hassle my parents went through enrolling me at Wiscasset Elim, so I wonder. I wonder if we existed at all or if we were birthed, quasi-formed, when we escaped the trailer. It's funny what old men ponder when we're left to ourselves, isn't it? As if all our banal traumas could be translated into a kind of lachrymose poetry filled with depth and meaning. This morning, there was a spider in the cupboard above the toaster where I keep my tea in a chipped cookie jar. It blinked at me, stood its ground, and I jerked backwards into the wall, gasping, clutching at my neck for the crucifix I haven't worn in years. Then I laughed and I swore because my hip is bad and my back is worse, and because being afraid of a tiny brown spider in your tea cupboard is ridiculous at my age, at any age, and yet there are reasons. Life isn't fair, but it is thermodynamic. There is always a cause, and I think about that quite a lot these days. The Akkadian word for spider is arene, which sounds like a girl's name if you whisper it the way my mother would, looking over her shoulder as if it was a secret we were hiding from. SHHHH, les arenes sont partout mon fils, and then she'd laugh. My cousins would laugh too if they were in spitting distance. I didn't have friends, but there were always cousins. Laughing, greasy girls in patched jumpers with scabby knees and rag curls. I was the oldest and the only boy, but I was afraid and they were. That was the joke. Donc c'est la vie. I can touch the earthy genesis of my irrational fears, but it's a fool's errand because you can't unmake a thing just by giving it a name and a place and a context. That's fairy tale magic, and it doesn't work on this side of the page. I remember there was a woodpile behind my mother's winter garden. I remember running from her chickens in early summer when I was 4 years old, barefoot through mud and bird shit. I remember climbing the woodpile to safety. My mother's chickens in my mother's garden, my father's woodpile, everything binary and deified. I remember splinters. I remember spiders. A nest of spiders is an abomination. I knew that as a child, 4 years old and grubby. when the awkward, grasping chub of my tiny hands ripped through soft bark and hell spilled out. Time hasn't changed my outlook. I screamed until I was unconscious. I screamed, and the scream was a door that opened into a lifetime of nightmares, dark, chittering scrapings, the epitome of alien hatred. I've been told that I exaggerate, but I know that's nonsense. There has always been pro-spider propaganda, a pro-spider agenda. Charlotte's Web is just a gateway. I've been mocked and coddled, lectured and chuckled over. I've been exposed. In 1990, the year I turned 14, a pretty girl lured me to the Criterion Theater in Bar Harbor for a midnight showing of Frank Marshall's Arachnophobia under the pretext of heavy petting, and I didn't sleep for weeks. I should have known better. I learned the hard way that pretty girls weren't to be trusted any more than Acadian mothers, because there is a rift between a woman's expectations and the fragile reality of a boy's unpublished psyche. The fact that spiders have nests revolts me on a molecular level, even now, on this side of middle-aged and mostly sober. It is an obscenity, a blasphemous perversion. Pregnant women nest. Children outgrow the nest, and sometimes that's sad, but it's a wistful kind of melancholy underscored by happy whisper prints and sacred memories. Nests are sanctuaries. Nests are nurturing refuges. I built my own nest on Strawberry Hill in the fall of 7, the way a bowerbird advertises for a mate, and it is still filled with the sticky music children leave behind. There's even a worn copy of Charlotte's Web in the sunroom bookcase. All of my indignity aside, I've come to believe that terror is a kind of currency. That fear is just the price we pay for all manner of common goods. The fear of losing someone or something is the cost of possession. The fear of death is the fair cost of living, and my irrational fear of spiders is nothing less than the wages of my wonder, of which there is an abundance. There are no free blessings save the grace of God, and even that is advertised as fire insurance more often than not, which is funny to me because I have never once imagined hell to be an inferno. My hell is dark and filled with spiders. From the Machia's Mariner, October 16th, 2020, reprinted with permission. Professor Emeritus Nelson has asked me to break down the season the way I might to an alien or a first-time Floridian expat who hasn't done their research, to paint an introductory portrait for the uninitiated. It seems there are still those among the aging faculty who remember my Mephistophelian wit with some kindness. I consider the challenge an honor, so here. October in Maine is an Edward Hopper burlesque if you can dig it. I was grown here and it still gets to me. Every year the same, but we're always surprised. We get wide-eyed and quiet after that first cold snap, when the leaves give up on an Indian summer and put on their party shoes. The wind perks and fluffs pillows that reek of sweet rot, and all the apples stop drop and roll at once. Autumn in Maine only gets her groove on in the cider press days leading up to All Saints, a ridiculous, comical mess of colors, sounds and smells that superimpose themselves on her austere Yankee armature like a virgin girl who hasn't quite figured out how makeup and perfume work. She tarts up, horny as a farm girl at a harvest dance, wicked in shades of candy apple red and Halloween orange. From Caribou to Kittery, it's a hell of a carnival slide into winter, and like I said, it catches us off guard every goddamn time because she's fast, and she locks lips with you without polite introduction. If you've any New England in you, you know October in Maine is like hearing a song for the first time, one time more, and that makes it a kind of magic. I thought so when I was a kid, and I think so now that I'm gray and pruned up around the edges. There's a fat squirrel in the dooryard, getting drunk off rotting crab apples, and I know he feels it too. 1. Shuffling ghost whisper prints. I'm a killer. I was dictating a letter to my alma mater on the back porch, smoking my breakfast, and my old friend the squirrel chittered back. He thinks I sound pretentious as fuck. He's right. Poetry at my age is a cheat code. Poetry is the pocket pussy of middle-aged and gin-soaked. It's 6 a.m. and there's Applejack in my tea, but the kids are old enough to get themselves dressed these days, and these days I'm invisible to them anyways. Boo and Penny know it's October, and whatever power it has over me is doubled up in them, because they still have baby fat hiding beneath their teenage indifference for their father. I don't get off on confession. I know some writers do, but not me. I've never been a fan of self-deprecating honesty. I'm not good at it. I write lies. When I woke up this morning, there was a ghost at the foot of my bed, and it occurred to me that I have to stretch and pay the piper if I want her gone. I need to exhale. Point of order. I'm a hack. I know that my agent knows it too. When I was a much younger version of myself, I wrote god-awful poetry in a little black notebook that fit in my back pocket. Now I talk at my phone and it transposes. It occurs to me that my phone is also black and small and lives in my back pocket, so nothing's really changed. Between the me who scribbled on napkins in the Acadia diner and the me debating poetic merit with an apple-drunk squirrel, there is a very shallow gulf of years. We don't change. We don't grow. We make promises, but most of those are lies, like my stories. Life is iterative. I haven't smartened up. I haven't caught the dog, but there's comfort in that. There's comfort in ritual and in sameness, and in the changing of the seasons that surprise us, but never annoy us by being completely unexpected. There's comfort in tea laced with brandy in a mason jar, and there is comfort in sharing words even if no one listens. I think every man is a knapsack full of patterns and Polaroids that fit like baseball cards in their proper sleeves. Every man is a handful of marbles like tiny planets filled with familiar people, places, and things. And time is just the breeze that blows October leaves into mountains made for jumping through. I turned 46 years old last week. I spent it drunk and maudlin. It's the first October I'm able to add widower to my list of labels. I am a lot of things, the sum of many parts and pieces you dig. I'm a father, I'm a rotten Catholic, a decent cook, I'm a pretentious hack whining into the void. I am a million billion tiny fragments, crystal shards and colors in the wind, and now I'm a widower. It's a creepy word and I don't like slipping it into the mix, but there it is. Maybe I'm not a billion things. Maybe I'm just one thing now. Erica died in January, swept away in an anticlimactic sneeze. It was months before widower insisted itself into my private vocabulary. Widower wasn't at the funeral, or in the obituary my mother-in-law wrote for me when I just couldn't. My sister didn't ask me what it felt like to be a widower. My children, Erica's and mine, didn't either. Why would they? It's an ugly, sad little word that belongs in a Victorian romance with pert governesses and emotionally impotent aristocrats. It doesn't belong in 21st century Maine. I am a well-educated redneck. I'm a sneetch on a beach, Hester Prynne at the post office sporting a nose ring, salt and pepper curls, and a rose tattoo. I have an airbrushed shroud of Turin tea, shirt and ripped jeans, Doc Marten sandals, and wool socks. I have scars and I am a widower. I don't want to talk about Erica. I don't. I don't want to talk about her fingerprints on the bathroom mirror that I haven't washed in 9 months, or about the wife-shaped hole in my mattress that I avoid by sleeping on the far edge of the king-sized bed. I don't want to talk about her plants that I hate watering or her phone that I still pay for because her voicemail message is enshrined there. I don't want to talk about how I keep picking up seashells on my evening walks to show her only to remember, too late, that my little crow has migrated. I have a pickle jar filled with periwinkles and broken sand dollars on the kitchen counter next to my shot glass menagerie, and I don't want to talk about it. Erica is a ghost. I am the writer and the drunk and the widower, and she is the ghost. Table set. I have a therapist. Everyone does these days, and she tells me that it's normal to grieve and to get mad and sad, and she thinks that writing is a healthy outlet. Bully for me. Damned convenient. She hasn't read anything I've published and won't. I don't know how I know this, but I do. I don't blame her. I don't pay her to be my fangirl after all. I pay her to exist. If my drinking gets out of hand, I remind the people around me that I'm in therapy like an incantation. Middle age, I've discovered, is lousy with incantations. And regret. Before I was a widower, I was a husband and a father. Before that, I was a murderer. Truth. I killed my ex-wife, my first wife, that is, in late October of 2000, and got away with it free and clear. That is what the ghost wants me to confess. I've always been a drunk. Boom. 2. Noises like chewing. My therapist, my agent, my father, my children. No one knows this thing I've done or why. How could they? This is a Gnostic gospel. I never told Erica what really happened to Andy, but death, it seems, is a cipher. Erica has been whispering to me for weeks now, nagging me like a bruise, like a headache, like a blackberry thorn in my sock. She wants the story, and there's no point pretending to be immovable or playing dumb because she knows. She needs me to say it out loud and write it all down, God knows why, but she does. The pumpkins on my porch are rotting, and the smell is like sex, cloying and sweet. In a few weeks, everything will be white-kissed, evergreen, and skeletal, but now, right here and right now, this island is a red and gold whirlwind that's hell-bent on denuding my oh-so-secret self. She knows that. The ghost knows everything. I can hear Penny in the kitchen putting the kettle on for her oatmeal. I think, sure, I will write it all down and you can read it over my shoulder. It's time, it's fine, what's yours is mine, and the ghost bristles my graying fur, disapproving. I shiver. I tell her, there's an ugly little story I've been chewing on for weeks, but it can wait, and it can. It isn't a very good story, and my agent's given up on me anyway. I promise Kitten I'll sing it like a song. Now I'm in the kitchen. Penny is eating her oatmeal with butter and strawberry jam, drinking her tea, and I know she misses her mom. She has a therapist too, and sometimes we go to family therapy and grief therapy together, and I know that the last thing a 13-year-old girl needs is to watch her father blubber into his breakfast booze. 8th grade is hard enough. I remember. I don't want her to think she's an orphan, so I smile, sit across from her. I don't want her to ask me if I'm okay and shift gears into a miniature version of her dead mother, so I make conversation, ask about homework, and the few friends of hers whose names I can remember. She rolls her eyes at me and munches her toast, and that's fine. Eye rolling is teenage female for status is QUO, Daddy. Oh, I ask her. Where's your brother? And she shrugs. Down cellar, probably, which is right where I left him. Tea and oatmeal ritual bleeds into the predictable coat, hat, and boot battle that I win as far as the dooryard. Beyond that threshold, I have no power over her, and I know that so I don't kick myself too hard. I imagine her shedding her dad-imposed layers like a rebellious butterfly made of freckles and anime-inspired eyeshadow the moment she hits the street. I imagine her being someone other than the victim of my poor life choices. I put her teacup into the sink and refresh my brandy. Andrea and I never had kids. Not breeding was the only responsible choice we ever made together. We were young, sure. We were stupid, crazy, unreasonable, damaged, wrong, and one day she left, and that was almost that. None of those things are excuses or reasons. Ostensibly they're facts, but there were reasons. They might not have made sense to anyone else but us, but there were reasons nonetheless. There were reasons why we were together, and reasons why she left when she did. There are reasons why I killed her. Reasons are what happen when subjective facts and objective reality clash in captivity, when they inbreed. There were variables. Secret, transparent, silent things, concrete, intangible, loud things. A string of dynamic static that defined our relationship, and there's nothing weird about that. There is a dead language of shared experience in every intimate relationship. There are hand signals and telepathy, the translation matrix of sighs, glances, and subtle nods or shakes of the head. There are trauma bonds. Every family has a photo album that isn't in general circulation, and we weren't special. Andy and I had been divorced for a year, so I wasn't a widower when she died, when I killed her. Not yet. In October of 2000, I was a scarecrow at the crowded funeral of a pretty blonde girl, and I'd shed tears. No one approached me, no one comforted me, and no one bothered to give me shit for being drunk. It was expected. Andy had left the year before in a moment of furious clarity, and Maine towns are small towns where everyone knows why. When Andrea Pelletier slammed the door on our rusty trailer one last time, I was angry and I was sad, and I was hurt, but I wasn't surprised. I'd been there from the beginning after all. I resented her because she made me smaller and I hated her. But it's been more than 20 years, and to be honest, I can't remember her voice. I don't have any pictures of her either, and that is by design. I had rage enough to kill her, and that's terrifying, too terrifying for keepsakes. Erica and I never talked about my first marriage. Erica wasn't interested in sharing me with a ghost, and that makes sense to me now. There's only so much head on a man to haunt. There is only so much room in a man's heart for a woman to work with. Erica tidied up the best she could, hung her shingle, and changed the letterhead. The Andrea years might have been written off as Cam's lost years if they hadn't included 4 years of high school. High school invariably comes up in conversation once you start having children or your buddies do. I think there's a stack of yearbooks somewhere in the attic, and I'm sure I could find an old and grainy shot of the two of us as kids. We were kids, and I don't want to. There's nothing good on TV that I haven't already watched a dozen times, and TikTok is boring. I just can't get into it. My headache is worse, and I made a promise, so that makes sense. I'm sorry, kitten. Here. 3. Go Fetch, 1995. When I was 11 years old, I watched my best friend Alex drown. We'd snuck through a broken, poorly boarded-up window into an abandoned cannery. We were exploring its rotten antiquity when the floor gave way under his keds, and down into the Sheepscot River he went. Game over. The building hulked over the river on massive, crooked pilings, most of which are still stuck in the mud today, reaching up for the 4-storied ruin that collapsed once and for all somewhere in the early 90s. Route 1 North crosses the Sheepscot Bridge in Wiscasset, and those slimy black fingers salute the cars passing through mid-coast Maine on their way to Boothbay or Scenic Points down east. They don't give a shit about childhood trauma. Why would they? One little boy's life is nothing but a footnote in the catalog of industrial accidents and tragedies a turn-of-the-century factory collects over time. Small towns are tragedy magnets. In communities where family trees weave like vines, and there are only 3 or 4 last names that matter, there is no obscurity. Alex's death was the type of vibration that gets walled off or boxed up in insulation, because everyone feels it, and the only other option is to fall down and give up. Moving on, swallowing tears and blinking in the wind are the benchmarks of small-town survival. My parents moved us south a few weeks after the funeral because it wasn't working for me. I had dreams that chased me when I was awake, nightmares about bats and wet wood ripping like meat, and of standing inches from the torn-up womb that spit my buddy into darkness. Rushing water and screaming gulls, and that's all, folks. No more comic books or candy cigarettes. No more who'd win in a fight debates. No more middle school girls with bug-bite tits and pigtails for Alex and me. Ruination. The theater was closed. I told Andy the story in a motel bed just south of Scarborough when we were 19. We'd spent nearly 5 hours on the road, and I was too damn tired to keep going. Take the next exit. There's gotta be a Motel 6 or something, which was code for I need a drink, and she knew that. We weren't due in Boston for another day and a half, and she didn't go for road beers in her car, so she nodded, and we dropped $30 bucks on a cabin with a double bed and an ancient Zenith. There was a Cumbies across the street, and no one carded teenagers in those indifferent end days of the 20th century. I bought a case of Ballantines and a box of cheerleader beers for Andy. We drank and screwed with the TV on. It was too cold to open the windows, and by midnight the room was a smoke box. Lucky Strikes and Camel Lights, sex sweat and beer fumes, miasma of post-adolescence. What's on your mind, lover boy? Trailing her fingers across the ridiculous patch of fur that led to my comatose manhood, head on my chest. The ashtray looked like a post-nuke monument. The television was a porthole. You've been weird since we drove through your old stomping grounds. Twitchy. Sorry, I hate road trips, you know that. Andy laughed into my chest and looked up at me. She was gorgeous, enormous blue eyes and blonde silk sweat glued to the oval of her face. Yeah, my little cave dweller, come on, fess up. What goosed you, for real? Nothing really. MMHM, I call bullshit, you owe me a kiss. Andy. I mean it. She climbed on top of me, straddling me, a milky white creature of the mist with perfect teenage breasts and porcelain skin. She leaned forward, her nipples touching mine, hands on my shoulders. She smelled like apple wine, strawberry lip gloss, and smoke. I do know you, Cameron. I know every little glitch, so tell me. Or fuck me again, or both. I opted for first things first and flipped her over on her knees like a dog. She didn't protest. I told her my story between smoke rings, side by side in the double bed. She didn't ask me any questions, and she didn't comment, which was a relief. When I was done, I squashed out my cigarette and rolled over. She big spooned me, one thin arm wrapped around my middle, and we slept until noon when the housekeeper knocked on the screen door to remind us that checkout had been at 9. The rest of the drive down to her grandparents' Chelsea townhouse was uneventful, and the visit was predictable. She didn't bring up Alex or how driving through Wiscasset had felt like a legion of geese goose. stepping through the graveyard of my early childhood. We suffered her family's dinner conversation and well-meant interrogations. We tolerated the indignity of sleeping in separate bedrooms, and we told brilliant lies about jobs we didn't have lined up and plans we hadn't made for the summer. We exaggerated our academic successes and downplayed the reputation Maine had as a party school. We did our best to look wholesome. The four of us went to high mass at St. Paul's Cathedral Sunday morning. Mr. Robertson and I played golf at his club, while Andy and her Graham went shopping in the city. I never drank in front of her family, but I had a leather-wrapped flask Andy had given me as a graduation present, and no one ever commented on my breath or wet eyes. Yankees don't see what they don't want to, and besides, wherever there are 4 Episcopalians, there is always a 5th. I'd forgotten our interlude in Scarborough by the time we'd settled into our role as cute college couple, and it wasn't until we were halfway home that Andy came back with a response. We were driving north past the iron works in Bath with its twin cranes, looking more like mechanical versions of Godzilla and King Ghidorah than the tools of men when she'd sighed. I suppose we could take 218 north to Ulna, then take town roads south back to 1. It'll add an hour and a half, but I don't mind as long as you work the map. I don't want to get lost in Cow Shit Corner. I hear it stinks. She was staring at the road, and there was nothing, absolutely no humanity in her voice. Cow Shit Corner. It's a real place, Cam. Check the atlas. I shit you not. It took me a second longer than it should have. She was suggesting we bypass the Sheepscot Bridge and its honor guard of pilings. She was being kind, which meant it was a trap. Andy wasn't kind, it wasn't her thing. I clenched and unclenched my fists. I shook my head. Andy, that's retarded. I could walk across that damned bridge and be fine. Oh, impassive, fixed forward. Sure, I'm not 11 anymore. It's fine, drive on through. No Cow Shit Corner souvenirs required. Andy had grinned and nodded at that, but it was a cold grin. She kept her eyes on the road. When we hit the small stretch of cobbled sidewalks and brick storefronts that made up Wiscaset's pedestrian downtown, she pulled over and turned to face me. She stared through me with dead fish eyes. She said, "Okay, Sonny Jim, here's your stop. I'll meet you on the Woolwich side. There's a Dairy Queen over there and I want a crunch coat. You, boy, go kill a giant." My whole body froze. My balls retreated, or at least tried to. My stomach was a rock. My lips twitched. Andy, I was joking about walking across. She blinked. I know, Cam, but I'm not. I want to see you beat it. I want to see you win. She paused, looked away, and smirked. It turns me on. Go fetch. That was the end of it, that phrase. Andrea and Cameron code words, go fetch. It meant I dare you, but it also meant prove you're worthy. It was what she'd said to me the first time I'd tried to unbutton her shirt and later her jeans. I'd been cautious, nervous, and she'd said, "Do you want to fuck me, little man? You can if you want to. But first you have to do something for me." But she hadn't really, those are just the translator's notes. What she'd said was, "Go fetch," and I'd stopped fumbling long enough to stare into her unblinking blue eyes. I'd been terrified of her calm authority, of her power. She dared me to go on, to take what I'd wanted, what I'd needed from her, and it became her go-to catchphrase whenever she smelled fear on my breath. Sitting across from me in her car, she made it clear that I had to deal with this if I was ever going to deserve her. She was drawing a line in the sand. So I swallowed, said nothing. I exited the car because demons or no demons, I was 19, and I was scared of what would happen to me if she disappeared. She left me on the sidewalk, pulled out onto Route 1 and drove away. I found a cigarette, lit it, and slipped my hands into the pockets of my leather jacket. It was freezing. There was an evil wind blowing, but the sun was unchallenged in the sky and the view was pristine. I began my bouncing, stupid walk towards the edge of town where Main Street ended and the bridge over the river began. There was no one on the sidewalk. Late October's chill had blown away the summer people who littered this particular patch of mid-coast Maine. There were locals somewhere, of course. Maybe they were watching me through curtain slits, but not on the street. The knick-knack stores and tourist trap bistros were shuttered, and the legendary hot dog stand was boarded up. What amazed me was how familiar the street felt. It shouldn't have. I'd spent a year of my life here, a watershed year even, but it did. The market on the corner where I bought penny candy and comic books was still there and completely unchanged. I wondered if Brian Pendleton was still behind the counter, and if his eyes still shadowed little kids like we were all potential shoplifters. I wondered if his chubby wife was still the elementary school's lunch lady, and if she remembered that I liked pickles on my sloppy Joe. There was an art gallery where Mr. Hasenfuss's print shop used to be, but the music box store and the overpriced specialty shop were the same. There was the bank's immutable granite. Behind the bank, I knew, there was a little lane that wound through a woodsy area pregnant with wild blackberry bushes. Past that was the library parking lot lined with rusty chain-link fencing that led down to the defunct railroad tracks where Alex and I used to walk and talk and hide from our parents. Those tracks followed the river perpendicular to Route 1 and passed where the cannery used to rise out of the mud like Howell's moving castle. On the other side of the bridge, there had been two monstrous wrecks, barely recognizable humps, 4 masters petrified in the sheepscot mud when my grandparents were young. They sank a few more inches every year, gone now, by the way. I used to have a picture of me and Alex sitting on a railroad tie with those skeletal ships casting their shadows over our freckled tans. Of course it looked and felt familiar. Part of me had died here in this little village with more antique stores than trailers. I'd been a kid here, dropped my accent here, made friends here, one friend at least. I'd changed here. I'd recreated myself, then flown south again. 8 years is the equivalent of a lifetime when you're 19, which is funny now that 10 years is more like a sneeze or a hiccup. Bobbing my way down Main Street to the bridge didn't feel like a homecoming, but it did make me feel small and vulnerable and afraid. It made me feel 11 again, and that had been a rough year. When the sidewalk ended, I jogged across Riverside Drive and hopped up onto the breakdown lane's little bump of a ledge to grip the green railing. The metal was icy, but it felt good to touch something cold. My hands were dry and hot. There wasn't a walking path across the bridge, but there was one hell of a view. To my right, the river widened and then split. There were docks peppering the far shore, Edgecombe on one side, Birch Point on the other. These were rich people places hidden by furious red, green, and gold trees, cottages closed down for the season. Indifferent cars and trucks bisected the vertical landscape, dragging contrails of leaves and refuse behind them. To the left were the ghost fingers, larger than life and ugly. Nightmare pikes, diabolical monuments to the death of industry, statuesque entropy on a stick. I could rattle off 1,000 adolescent poetic indulgences, and none of them would be satisfying because the truth is trite. They were a memorial to my lost innocence. I can say that now, 26 years later, from the relative safety of my widower's couch. It's easy now. It's easy to scratch my beard and sound ridiculous and hubristic, and to have a good chuckle while I do it. It's easy to feel good about how fucking profound and in tune with the universe I've become. So in tune, in fact, that I can indulge in sesquipedalian autoeroticism as if my memories are a joke I've finally matured into. It's bullshit, you know. The truth is I was scared. I was scared and cold. I ran, I remember that. I ran because suddenly only animal fear remained. I ran, crying, drowning beneath a dozen atmospheres, and I pissed myself. I don't remember doing that, but I must have because I remember the smell and the cold, wet glue of my jeans on the other side of terror. I was on the other side of the bridge, shaking and dry heaving, and there was spit running out of the loose flaps of my lips. Andy was there, holding an ice cream cone in one hand and looking satisfied. She hugged me, and then we got in her car and drove the rest of the way home in silence. She didn't congratulate me or apologize to me or ask me how I felt. We never talked about it. She didn't need details because she'd won, she'd tossed her stick, and I'd fetched it. That was enough. Her challenge had never been about my healing or embracing the Übermensch or any kind of therapeutic catharsis. It was as an assertion of ownership, nothing more. I belonged to her, I was part of her idiom. A memory, an unresolved anguish that didn't involve her, didn't concern her. I think it offended her, and that's rough, because I could have written a novel about Alex's death. About bats in the cannery singing requiem and the dark water that erased my friend from existence. Now, I never will. Andy zeroed out the trauma, she ended the conversation. Andy did shit like that all the time, and in the context of this confession, I'm gonna label her callous disregard for my sovereign narrative. Exhibit A. It's not an excuse or justification for murder, but it is one of many reasons. Many. From the Author's Journal, 2020. Houseplants are a subjectively weird concept. Dig it. Imagine a man walking through the woods. Picture him immersed in the natural world. Close your eyes if you have to. He smells the pine tar, the rich scent of decaying leaves and needles that crunch beneath his expensive timberland hiking boots with every step, and he smiles. It's a good smell, a satisfying crunch. The breeze feels lovely against his skin, in his lungs, cooling, refreshing. The soothing sound of a nearby stream bubbling underscores a narcotic symphony of buzzing bees and birdsong. Can you picture it? Are you there? I am. The sun shines down through the canopy of ancient pines in delightful diagonals, and all is good. All is as it should be. He picks up a pinecone and puts it in his pocket. He doesn't know why, it just seems natural to collect a souvenir. He does it without thinking. Later he pockets a few smooth stones that catch his eye. One is pink quartz, another is speckled granite the shape of a tiny egg. They feel good in his hand. He doesn't know why that is, but he accepts the truth of it without concern. He sniffs at flowers, splits open spearmint leaves, and peels off little rolls of birch bark because he can, no other reason. He thinks it's just what you do when you're walking through the woods. If he thinks anything at all, it's possible he has a variety of similar tokens waiting for him at home. The keepsakes of walks gone by, collecting dust in mason jars or tucked into the corners of bookshelves. It's more than possible, it's likely. Pieces of the outside brought inside like trophies or totems. Houseplants are the inevitable extension of this phenomenon. Now imagine the first man who ever brought home a houseplant. Imagine the conversation that surrounded that momentous event. Paleolithic man, honey, I'm home. Paleolithic woman, what's that? PM, this, oh, this is a shrub. PW, why do you have a shrub? PM, I dunno, I like it. PW, can we eat it? PM, oh no, it's very poisonous. PW, you brought home a poisonous shrub. PM, yeah, I thought it might brighten up the cave a bit. PW, won't it just dry up and die? PM, well sure, if I just left it there. But I'm going to put some dirt in a big clay bowl and stick the root thingies in the dirt. Then I'll give it water whenever I remember to. PW, you're gonna give the shrub some of our water. PM, yup, when I remember to. PW, you do realize I carry that water on my back more than a mile every day from the river. PM, it won't need much. PW, it gets pretty dark in here. Don't shrubs like sunlight? PM, I'll put its bowl by the mouth of the cave. That should do. PW, you've really thought this through, eh? PM, not really. It was sort of an impulse. I was walking through the woods and I thought, you know what I like looking at? Shrubs. The fact that humans feel compelled to make outside things inside things is subjectively weird. The converse is rarely applied. People don't wander the woods and think, hey, you know what this arboreal paradise needs? An ottoman. Humans don't, as a rule, impose the indoors on the outdoors. They do, however, gather nature's smells and textures into their homes and create artificial symbiosis. They do that a lot, and I think it says a lot about the natural vs. unnatural state of the human condition. We do it because it makes us happy is one of the worst reasons for ever doing anything. It's right up there with because it feels good and everyone else is doing it. But it does make us happy. It does feel good and everyone else is doing it. Garden supply is a big industry. So is landscaping. They even sell houseplants in Walmart, so you can't argue that it's an upper-class obsession. It's a human fascination, and it transcends every demographic vector. Normative or not, fulfillment or enrichment notwithstanding, it's an odd concept on paper. It's good for the psyche, you say. It's harmless, you say, and sure. But the plants aren't giving consent, the plants aren't being enriched. Cultivation and transplantation aren't the voluntary actions of an oppressed organic community. Academically, gardening is more akin to eugenics and colonialism than it is to anything beneficent. That shrub didn't ask to move in with you. That seed didn't ask to be planted in your window box. You did that. For you. Of course, plants aren't sentient aboriginals or displaced natives, but that doesn't change the fact that transplanting a seasonal shrubbery is not an act of salvific charity. Planting an African violet in your den is not a selfless sacrifice for the betterment of plants everywhere. You do it because it makes you happy. It may be harmless, but it's a selfish habit. Can we all agree on that at least? Now, there's nothing wrong with making your suburban nightmare cube more pleasant by introducing some fragrance, some color, some life. And I really don't think the plants care one way or another. But it is odd. It's odd because humans build houses and airports and shopping malls, but crave gardens. Men and women embrace the natural world with one hand and reject it in favor of the artificial with another, and they're sad about it. They placate their sadness with houseplants and city parks. They make their wage slavery palatable by giving life to Christmas cacti and jade trees, and never take the time to think about how strange that is. I think it's safe to say that the natural condition of man is organic, not synthetic. I also think it's pretty self-evident that we take our rebellion very seriously. Take a trip to Dubai, tell me I'm wrong. I'm not fomenting a social revolution. Don't worry. I think plants are great, I do. I just think it's funny that the most sophisticated biological organism on the planet has a habit of bulldozing old-growth forests to make room for shopping malls. Shopping malls that sell potting soil. Shopping malls with solariums. 4. There is a dragon. It's too hot in here, and that's my fault. I got stuck in the story and wasn't paying attention to what my hands and feet were doing. It happens. Erica was always cold, and it's just habit to tease the thermostat up higher and higher when I talk to her. And that's what I'm doing. I'm telling her stories, and you're along for the ride. Without Erica to navigate, I shuffle through the house and my day without a compass or a road map. I don't clean or tidy up, but I do move objects from place to place for no apparent reason. I rearrange my environment. I adjust my proximity to various things. I don't shop so much as I replace the things that get used, and that's not the same thing. I maintain the cupboard's tableau. I don't wander without purpose because the widower shuffle is a purpose, filling time with benign activities that mimic productivity but have no emotional cost. It's an art form, my medium. The empty house is my studio and my palette. Outside is October, and I don't smoke in the house. I could, but it would bother Penny the way it used to bother her mother. Quitting isn't an option, so I punctuate my shuffling and my solitude with intervals of October chills and October smells and October's wildlife. I engage with the outdoors. My therapist thinks that's great. I'm not depressed, just listless. I don't experience despair, I just get sad and stay there, nest there, and content myself with being sad. I don't drink to forget or to numb myself, and I think that's an important distinction to make. I drink because I have always drank, and because my body chemistry is calibrated with a booze variable. I drink because there are dragons in my head, and they're noisy fuckers who never sleep. I sedate them the only way I know how, the only way that works. I prevent them from disrupting my shuffling sadness, and life goes on one day at a time. I'm punching my clock and continuing to exist, and that's more than my late wife is doing. Or was doing. I'm not crazy. At least I don't think so. I'm tired and ill-equipped for what comes next, but that isn't the same thing. My wife is dead. My children and I share a quiet limbo here on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. My daughter is every teenage boy's dream girl, and she isn't interested in boys, which makes her every father's dream girl. My son is a 19-year-old high school dropout with sad eyes who plays guitar, smokes weed, and does something. I'm not sure what, but he doesn't ask me for money, and I don't buy weed, so he's getting it somewhere. I provide food and shelter and irony and puns, and I love them. Neither of my children are orphans. I'm just distracted. When I dramatically end a chapter of my noise with an admission of murder, it isn't a gimmick. I wasn't making a funny or employing hyperbole. I killed Andrea in the fall of 2000 for reasons I've never had to justify because no one ever found out. When I write that my late wife Erica's ghost has been haunting me, I don't mean that my guilty conscience is manifesting in some sort of Jungian or Freudian way. I mean it in the most literal way possible. Ghosts are real, and my wife is haunting me. She lurks under the hum of the appliances we bought on credit, and sometimes she ruins porn for me with extremely unsexy commentary. I rearrange our knickknacks, the memory markers we collected during the 21 years we played house, and she drowns out the stereo. Sometimes she goes dark, sometimes she's in the wind, and sometimes she's a subtitle or a fortune in a cookie. She's adaptable. She's a chameleon. She's a skin dancer, and her voice, her literal voice, underscores my everything. She wants to punish me, I think. I tell her she's dead, and she should go into the light or move on or reincarnate, or whatever happens when you're 40-something and an 18-wheeler loses control and rolls over your little blue Nissan. Whatever is supposed to happen. I used to believe in God, and maybe I still do. But if he exists, he gives the dead way more of a leash than any of the big books have ever let on, and it's monotonous. I hate crying. I hate remembering her and remembering that she's gone and hearing the disappointment in her voice when all I want is a cuddle, a happy ending, and for everything to make sense again. I hate that she's made me feel guilty for something I got over a long time ago, and I hate that I'm here, right now, sharing words I don't want to say for people who don't want to hear them. Not like this. Not now. This isn't catharsis or redemption. This is just bullshit, ghost edition. Erica is sitting cross-legged on the hooked rug in the living room I've been packing back and forth across, dragging memories from deep sixth lock boxes, because she wants to understand the endgame, and I can't make her if I don't sketch out the landscape first. Erica never asked me about my childhood traumas because I never advertised them, and she never asked me about my divorce because divorces are ugly and unsexy, and when I met her, she was all about sexy. In retrospect, there was a lot of unbottling that never happened that should have happened, a lot of background noise that should have been addressed. But she was young, and I was busy recreating myself in the aftermath of Andrea. She's rolling her eyes, her ghost eyes, at me. She's twirling her ghost fingers in a get-on-with-it gesture I can't see, but I can feel behind my eyes. I'm stalling because I think if I let it out in increments, it won't overload my circuitry. Self-preservation and whatnot. I'm weaving around the downstairs carousel now and flapping my arms like a duck, like I always do when I'm overstimulated and chemically retarded at the same time. I need another drink, and that's the easy part. This house is a bunker and a shrine, and it's well-stocked and well-maintained. I was never good with limits or boundaries or departures, because those things weren't my job. I excel at endless preparation and maintenance, so Erica made lists for me and turned my key and pointed me where she needed me to go. That was her special purpose. But now I'm alone, and I have to make do without marching orders. I do feel a bit like a soldier, not a particularly focused one, not one with any sort of a plan beyond wandering the front in search of my fractured company. A well-provisioned soldier, wandering between the front and the wilderness. Erica's ghost is muttering. I think I should go outside and breathe air that isn't recycled for a bit. Erica doesn't leave the house, and it's a betrayal to leave her hanging, but I need a break from this. I need to kick the leaves and pretend that the sun is warm. Everything is a crumb. I don't shower often. It's a peculiarity that's only gotten worse since the accident. Maybe worse is the wrong choice of words. Maybe I should say that I never bathed frequently, and now I hardly think of it at all. I've no one to sniff me while we spoon. I don't have to worry about what my skin tastes like now, so I don't. It simplifies things. I can sleep in my jeans and my shirt, and I keep socks balled up in my boots, so getting ready is hardly a chore. I wear a lot of hats. Outside, I'm nobody else's concern, and no one notices or cares because I am virtually transparent. It's equal parts liberation and sadness. Liberating because I conserve energy this way, reserve my fuel. Sad because it is. I've become a hologram without solidity. I used to have friends, and I suppose they still exist, somewhere, doing somewhere things and giving me space, giving me time to heal. I like to think so, at least. I like to think that my friends are sensitive rather than afraid of awkward newness. I like to picture them playing cards in a smoky room beneath a Mickey Mouse clock, just passing the time until I'm finished with my metamorphosis. He just needs time, they say. He'll snap out of it. Which is a silly thing to think, really, but it's sweet, so I forgive my imagination. I can be benevolent when I'm in the mood. To be fair, it was one hell of a Hiroshima. I don't hate water, I'm just afraid of it. I'm afraid of a lot of things, to be honest, of immersion, of suffocation, of crowds and open spaces like cornfields, of conversations with strangers and open heart surgery. I'm petrified of spiders on such a fundamental psychic level that I'd eagerly support arachnid genocide legislation if there was such a platform and say fuck all to the ecosystem. Sometimes I worry about ducks. There seem to be more and more of them every year, and I'm suspicious when they don't fly south. There's a coven of them that huddle on the ice fringe of some sound, and they strike me as conspiratorial. Erica used to laugh at my quirks and my little rants. Erica was the spider slayer. Erica never chided me for sitting in the sand while the family splashed about in the lake. She encouraged me to be vigilant, lest the ducks fly off with our bologna and cheese sandwiches. Erica encouraged me to shower by pouring me a shot of brandy and promising to drain my balls down her throat if I did so. Erica was a peach. I know that there are friends outside the bunker, and that I could cut my hair and shave and clean up, but not today. Today I'll return my library books instead, slip them through the impersonal drop slot, follow the shore path from Albert's Meadow to Westsent, extension. I will walk with my hands in my pockets, and I will smoke and squint my eyes against the white, impotent sun. I will let the reds and golds and greens be my picture frame. I will pass through. It'll be good for me, I think. It'll be good to bounce up and down, emptied without a duty of care. I inform the house that I'm heading out and cock my head to one side. The ghost in the living room sighs and throws her invisible hands up in the too hot air. There are dust motes but no words. Penny is at school and Boo is probably still down cellar. Probably. It occurs to me that he may have ducked out the back door without ceremony while I was dictating. It's possible. He doesn't interrupt my weirdness. I shrug, slip on my coat and my wool hat and meet the sidewalk with its frozen skirt of leaves. My street is empty and the air is dry ice. I fix my cigarette in place and head towards town. Crunch, crunch. I wonder where all the cats have gone. I hope that they all have homes and hearths to hibernate in. The summer streets are lousy with cats, unleashed and regal. They loll and stretch and creep on ballerina paws, and they watch. They yawn. I've always liked cats, envied them. I think I'd like to be a cat and be above the concerns of men, to have a feline consciousness, a feline detachment and aloofness. I wish I was more of a hunter. I've always been a mouse, and mice don't hunt, they scurry and hide and gather. I am a gatherer, and that's all there is to it. My house has become a rainy day evacuation plan, doomsday vault, a break glass in case of emergency cupboard, canned food, bottled water, tins of tobacco, handles of vodka and Canadian whiskey, extra house keys, light bulbs, batteries and Band-Aids, giant bottles of ibuprofen and expired antibiotics. I don't throw things away. I find room for things and catalog them for future use. It was my mother's father who started calling me Mouse when I was 4, when it was my habit to run away from the farmhouse where we spent our summers. I never made it far. I used to hide cookies in my pockets, in my socks, in the barn, just in case cookies. I kept apples and date bars beneath my bed. Sometimes my mother would wave her arms at me or scream at me from the laundry room because of the crumbs, and my grandfather would laugh and tell her that it was no use, that I couldn't help it. I was what I was. He was right, I suppose. He called me his little field mouse. He had no idea. Erica is a crumb. So is Andy. All of this nostalgia is a clutter of crumbs from cookies tucked away for later use, just in case, anecdotes stored on microfiche, about Granddad and Mum, about Alex, about Andy, about poor disembodied Erica. I still keep jerky and Hershey bars in my coat pocket. There's a $100 bill folded up and tucked behind the Humane alum card in my wallet, and there are photos of my children behind my expired driver's license. I don't forget anything because I don't allow myself the luxury. I vacuum seal the bits I don't want or need to hold in my front brain and stuff them under my mental mattress. I don't think that's abnormal. I imagine everyone has a priest hole, a deep storage, a dark web. I imagine we're all rodents of some kind or another, hoarding, collecting, cataloging, prepping for the apocalypse. Maybe no one is a cat. Maybe some mice have just learned to hunt as an extracurricular. When I turn onto Main Street, there are too many people I don't recognize, and I groan. I should have seen that coming. This town is a trap, a 21st century mousetrap for rodents on the run from ennui and points beyond. October sights and sounds and smells on the edge of the North Atlantic, complete with patchwork quilts draped over bunny slope mountains and picturesque Instagram-worthy coastlines, to influence away the doldrums of whatever rat race you call home. We have lighthouses and cairns and pebble beaches littered with sea glass and sand dollars. We have pubs and shops, merchandise to pocket and postcard your weeks of paid vacation. Dig it! We have frame-worthy snapshots, quaint and inspiring, shore dinners, craft beer and novelty shot glasses. I live in the middle of a travel agency's fever dream. But summer is on life support, and it's only a matter of time. October is the herald and harbinger of the Ice Queen's return. October tourists are the last dutiful pilgrims, newly wed and nearly dead beneath the autumn canopy, dancing to the death knell of the season. In a month, nothing will remain but their crumbs and their disposable income, which is fine. Winter is about remembering who we are and why that's so. The old guard, the Yankee families and bohemian transplants who keep warm by cuddling close to the wood stove all winter long, are defined by the transitioning season, because on the other side of October's threshold we remain. We bitch about it, but we remain. Andy was an island girl, Erica was not, and I think that has a lot to do with their respective lives after death. Andy remains buried in the granite sugar cubes that prop us up while Erica floats above. I was her only tether here after all. I carried her over the fence post and the garden gate when she was a summer girl from away, and I tied her balloon string to a crab apple tree when I married her and gave her children. Our children are an anchor. I wish I was a better father for them. I need to engage more. I drop my overdue books in the mail slot and picture myself emerging from a salt-crusted cocoon. My hands are pink and white icicles. I really should be wearing mittens. Memo to self: unpack the rest of the winter gear from the attic and make sure to pay the oil bill this month. Make an effort to engage with your children, Cameron. Drink less, listen more. Get your shit together in time for ice fishing and pond hockey and sledding parties and bonfires. The small humans need you to remain human, Cam. Christmas is coming and it will be a year in January. 1 whole year without their mother. Engage, Cameron. Engage. I skirt the village green and decide to bypass the shore path. It's too cold without mittens, and I'm suddenly very conscious of how much I'm weaving on my feet. My throat is dry and the air is sharp, and I want to make tea and be present when Penny gets off the bus. I should shower and change my clothes. I should stop feeling like a victim long enough to make a proper dinner. I should do all of these things, and maybe if I turn on all the lights and say a prayer, my dead wife's ghost will hold her tongue until the house is asleep. I cross town on a sharp diagonal and fumble for my keys with rigid fingers. Inside, everything will be warm and cozy, quiet but not quite empty. From the Author's Journal, 2021. Everyone hunts. It doesn't matter if the everyone in question identifies as a hunter or is even aware that they are about the family business. We are all hunting something or someone, somewhere or somewhen. We are all made in the Father's image after all. We are all poor reflections of the divine mind who spun the spider silk of creation into a cosmic Rand McNally road atlas for want of purpose. We hunt for meaning, and it's a bloody business. I remember reading C.S. Lewis in my undergrad. Not the fun stuff about Jesus lions and talking beavers. No. Essays on grief and loss that spilled out of him when his sunset bride died young, leaving the old man lost. I remember a quote badly, so forgive me if you know better, but the gist of it was, if I find in myself desires nothing in this life can satisfy, I can only conclude that I was made for another world. Lewis was hunting heaven, you see. Most Christians are. If I were God, I think I'd find that amusing, alone in my many-roomed mansion, wanting nothing more than to be human again. To get it right this time. I don't think there's anything wrong with dissatisfaction. On the contrary, I think it's our factory setting, and if yearning for heaven is your gold ring, then I say go for it. As long as it's an honest desire to transcend, that is. If you're just running from hell, then you're not really hunting at all, and that's unnatural. There's a big difference between avoiding pain and courting joy. There's a royal gorge between animal fear and sapient ecstasy. Dig it. Dad knows the difference. It's in the design specs. My mother wasn't interested in heaven or hell, and I like to blame her for my indifference to both situations. Teresa Pelletier suffered from uninspired adequacy, which is to say she was good at everything without ever being exceptional in any way, and it vexed her. My mother hunted validation the way pedophiles hunt altar boys or addicts their next high. She hunted praise above and beyond the natural love that comes with a husband and children who couldn't help but adore her. And she died a miserable, unsatisfied harridan. She died alone in a bottle of gin. I think I just lied to you, and I'm not sure if it was because I'm bitter or just trying to diminish my mother. Probably both. I inherited a lot from her. I inherited her habit of minimizing genius when it's not the flavor of genius you were hopping for. I inherited her knack for finding a flaw in every victory. I have her eyes and most of her catchphrases. The facts are hiding beneath an elegant conceit. I'm a bird hunter. That's my addiction, baby birds with broken wings. In some ways, the worst and least healthy ways, I identify with Christ. Christ was about his Father's work. Christ was a hunter too, an agency of the first hunt at least. Listen. Love, authentic love, requires an object, and so God is trifurcated into Creator, Son, and Spirit. The Creator loves the Son, and the Spirit moves across the breadth of creation, enabling that love to manifest in a million billion motes of sentient dust. Love becomes purpose. Love becomes quarry, but quarry runs. Quarry resists. Christ walked the earth spreading the good news that the Father loves them, and we killed him for it because we're competitive hunters, and we don't like being anyone's object. When I say that I identify with Christ, it's only a mild blasphemy and a common one. I want to fix people who can't be fixed, that's all. That's it in a nutshell. It's my horrible purpose to love people against their will, and I'm good at it. It's easy to love the broken, to want to mend their wings, to point at the sky and make promises. Like Christ, I hunt the damned, because that's what Dad wants from me. 6. Happy birthday to me, 1997. I've never woken up hungover. It isn't much of a victory when you consider that a hangover suggests there was enough of a caesura in your drinking to allow your body to rebel. I woke up still drunk on my 22nd birthday, as usual, and rolled out of my drool pillow onto the floor, which was white-tiled, cold, and unfriendly. I didn't sleep in the loft when Andy was away as a precautionary measure. Without the barrier of her body, I was apt to fall 8 feet into the confusion of our tiny kitchen living space, and debased as I still chose life. We didn't have a couch then. We were lucky to have found a studio apartment in walking distance of the UMaine campus, so we counted our blessings and made do. I kept a bachelor pillow and blanket on ground level in a cupboard next to the camp fridge, close to the beer and the apartment's center of gravity. We didn't have a television, but we did have a record player and 2 giant Pioneer speakers that sat back to back and served double duty as our dinner table. We had folding camp chairs and a bookcase filled with bar glasses and ashtrays and a tiny desk with a glass chess set. We had so many books, they lined the floors and window sills. Romance novels and postmodern existentialism, Danielle Steele and Kafka. Why did she leave you alone, Cam? Andy was pre-med and spent the first half of most weeks at the hospital in Portland, 3 HRS, south of our little love nest. It was all part of the plan, and I didn't hate it. I liked the time to myself. I liked reading and drinking and smoking in solitude. Andy wrinkled her nose at me a lot when I got sloppy. Andy liked to comment on the status of the returnables and on the disproportionate budgetary allotment designated Cameron's drinking habit. I would point out that it was my financial aid we were living off of, and that her gym membership equaled a case of black velvet each month, and she'd roll her eyes. My eyes would remain fixed and unblinking. Red, tired, but unblinking. Were there other girls? No, there weren't other girls because I was lazy, and because I hate conflict, and because Andy was always wet and she liked to be choked. No, because Andy never had a headache, and if she was bleeding, she wasn't shy about sodomy or swallowing. Andy lacked a moral compass and a gag reflex. My eyes didn't wander because my body was content, and my mind was saturated with Greek and Latin syntax, ecclesiology, sociology, and alcohol. I was a studious little mouse. Nose in a book, head full of fumes, and I never dreamt. I slept like the dead. I never touched another woman until that October. What happened? My birthday happened, and Aaron happened, and that was the beginning of the end of the something Andy and I shared, of the universe we had scraped together and sent spinning. Shush and let me remember it correctly. The house is a static environment now, like a time capsule or a curio cabinet that people happen to live in. It's a warm bubble, and the warmth is appreciated by my red nose and frozen fingers. I'm home just in case anyone was worried, and I'm thrown off by a clang and grunt from the kitchen. My son has emerged from his cave and is mucking around in the sink. He lives, I think, but I don't act surprised, not out loud at least. I don't want to frighten the wildlife back into hiding. "Hey, Dad." He meets me in the hall and smiles briefly. He reeks of weed and hormones. "Are we experiencing some sort of spoon shortage?" That makes me laugh because we are, and I have absolutely no idea why. Part of me assumes that our spoons had been migrating south to the cellar, and why not? I didn't intrude into Boo's world. Not since he relocated from his childhood bedroom, next to mine, into the subterranean world of exposed pipes and hot water heaters. I had no idea what sort of sculpture garden he had crafted for himself down cellar. "I've stashed a few in the bread box." He raises his eyebrows. "We have a bread box." I rest both of my chilled hands on my adult son's shoulders and give him my best I shit you not grin. "Yes, son of mine. It's where I hide spoons, don't you know? Come on, I'll show you." I introduce him to the bread box and we share a bowl of cereal. Then he's off to his somewhere to do his something. "He's your son." Cam kisses my ear, and I guess so. He's lost. He needs his mother to look out for him, honey bunny. But you're dead, aren't you? You dropped that ball. It's unfair, but I'm not going to let her diminish me or make me feel guiltier than I already do. Later, in the living room again, with my slick little phone taking dictation, and the ghost is asking me questions about infidelity, and I wonder if she ever strayed. If she had, I never would have known it. Not unless she had wanted it known, that is. I'm not self-absorbed, that's not it. I'm just... You're distracted, Cam. You're self-medicated. Numb, sedate, you don't engage. I know, I'm working on it. Now be still and listen. I was alone and awake despite the din because the sun and I had an unwritten agreement to work together, no matter what my blood had to say about it. I was drunk, and it was early, and when I peeled myself off the floor, the only conscious thought driving me was a need for biscuits and butter and sunny side-up eggs, Irish coffee and bacon fat. I was dimly aware that it was my birthday, or that it had been or would be soon, but that wasn't relevant. It wasn't important enough to sort out. I needed pants, that was vital. I needed a sweater and socks and boots and a hat and a wallet and keys and a shot of something strong to wash the dry off my tongue. I needed a cigarette and a light and my glasses and my messenger bag with its collected fragments of space-time fillers. My notebooks and pens and aspirin, the Greek translations I was laboring over, and my spare flask. I might have looked in the mirror, but I doubt it. I hate mirrors. I always look blotchy and out of phase, and it's disconcerting. I might have brushed my teeth. I probably did. I probably did all sorts of tiny autonomous things, but my brain was fixed on breakfast, so everything else just happened. My outside skin was either hung on hooks or lived in a pile by the door, so I was out in the squinting bright lights and brisk inhalation of an October morning, before you could say Applejack was Hemingway's preferred poison. Point of fact, it was. Outside, everything was nonsense and business as usual. College towns are ridiculous, farcical. It's the way they pantomime grown-up cities, how they cater to the quays, form humans that inhabit them and crawl across them in a perpetual posturing or mimicry of maturity. College towns are like Hollywood mock-ups with artificially flavored facades, the coffee shops and bookstores and bistros and second-hand music emporiums tucked into dingy basements. College towns are a schizophrenic clash between post-adolescent ex-men and a parasitic working class. I remember my sociology professor going off about how it didn't matter what generation is currently rebelling or erupting. Flappers, greasers, beatniks, peaceniks, hippies, hipsters, punk rockers, or alterna, tots. Every decade has a soundtrack and a cause and an enemy. Every reformation has a costume and a voice, and every movement has a stomping ground that provides cultural shelter from the real world. Nothing is new or unique beneath the grease paint. I believe that. I walked through it every day, closing the door on my cave, opening it onto a film lot underscored by 90s post-punk indie label hubris. Symptoms of a college town: there's too much brick, There are too many benches under too many trees, and every park has a gazebo or a platform ready-made for busking or pontificating or protesting something, activating, fucking shit up John S. Hall style, and being seen doing it. That's key. The campus rises out of the fertile earth like a feudal lord's castle, and the town radiates from it in concentric rings of overpriced apartments and trendy Heidi, holes where you can be seen being indifferent and unlike everyone else you want to be like. It's like Epcot's Lost World, fabricated and phenomenally expensive. Fake, but charmingly so. Bohemian in the safest way possible. Orono, Maine tries its best and almost succeeds. The problem isn't the college or the student body. The problem is that Maine doesn't know how to grow a city, fake or otherwise. I'd love to say it's just a numbers game or a symptom of being remote, of being so far removed from the Bostons, Hartfords, and New Yorks of the world, tucked up in an underdeveloped corner of the continental U.S. But that's not the issue. Vermont can pull it off after all. The real problem is Mainers. We can congregate in large numbers, but we can't escape our innate Yankee provincialism. We're too clan-oriented to pull off ecumenical diversity. We don't do multiculturalism, not well at least, and so our college towns are awkward attempts at best and hideous miscarriages more often than not. Looking back, I think there's a kind of charm in that forced failure. Looking back, I find the effort cute and quaint, like a macaroni rosary or a clay ashtray covered in glitter and broken seashells. In 1997, I was 22, and I found the whole college identity crisis tiresome. I never learned the art of pretentious irony. I was a county boy studying classics at an overgrown cow college that suffered delusions of grandeur. I drank heavily. I read Homer and Aristophanes. I filled ashtrays with unfiltered Lucky Strikes. I fucked my fiancé like a dog in the loft of my studio apartment, and sometimes I slept on the floor because sometimes I had to do the drinking and smoking and reading on my own. When I went outside, I bobbed and weaved with purpose, head down through the human cholesterol that sported B. 3 blocks east and 1 north, there was Orono, Maine's version of a bodega. A shabby convenience store with a grill and chrome stools like trumpet keys, cozied up to an ancient and pitted linoleum counter. Behind the counter was a flat top, where an overweight dwarf in a hairnet shoveled a mountain of fried potatoes back and forth with an enormous metal spatula. There were foil ashtrays next to ketchup bottles and Tabasco bottles and piles of wrinkles paper napkins held down with a painted rock. Smoke and grease, all the smells of heaven. This place was all mine. Andy would never have been caught dead in such a pit. It was my secret, not so guilty paradise. When I opened the door, there was a little bell that announced me, and I always felt like Norm in Cheers. The same faces reading the same local papers and drinking the same coffee out of chipped and stained mugs. The usual suspects smoking cigarettes and comparing grievances, politics and the weather, Red Sox baseball and Patriots football. I was a known commodity. I got nods. I was an acceptable transplant in this den of locals because I didn't flaunt any collegiate airs and I wasn't from away. I was a county boy by way of Wiscasset, Lewiston, and Mount Desert Island. I took a seat between the far wall and an old man in Carhartt overalls, dropped my knapsack, and drummed my fingers. "Morning, Renee." The little big man didn't turn around. He was singing something in broken French that marked him as one of my people. He cleared a space on his grill and produced eggs from a bowl hidden beneath my line of sight. He cracked them with one hairy hand and shook salt and pepper over them with a metal shaker. When he was satisfied, he found me a mug and managed a smile. I didn't place an order, he just knew what I wanted. Is that strange? It might be, I'm not sure. The presumption was comforting. It meant I was known, that I was familiar. I like repetition and sameness. I think most people do. "I'm gonna close my eyes," he half grinned and dropped me a tired wink. I winked back and slipped my flask from a hidden pocket. I filled half of the chipped mug with whiskey and sighed. All part of the ritual, everything as it should be, static. We didn't have cell phones then. I'm not even sure if they existed. I suppose they must have. It would be 10 years before I broke down and got one of my own, but I did have a pager, as strange as that seems now. Andy had bought it for me when she started her hospital rotation, so she could remind me to be places and to do things I'd otherwise forget. It beeped at me while I sipped my mother's milk. Mr. Carhart raised an eyebrow, and I gave him a comical what you gonna do kind of smile. It's my fiancée, I apologize. She worries about me, and I see the little digital ticker tape reads, Happy BDAY brat be good, and I laugh. Out loud I say it's my birthday, and Renee and company tip invisible hats at me. That's right, I thought. It is today, isn't it? I made mental note to check the calendar when I got home and to cross off the necessary days. If I did, Andy would assume I slept through them, and then I'd have to listen to her eyes blinking. No, thank you. I remember making a micro-resolution to enjoy consciousness and to leave footprints behind as evidence. That would make her happy, and that would make my life easier. Smooth like Teflon. I was alone on my birthday, but I was. I had grease and firewater and invisibility amongst the familiar. I was 22. I ate. I contemplated what comes next, and then I smoked and paid and dismounted. I overtipped, I always do. Fiancé, it's a surreal word. It's a surreal state of unfinished being. The wedding, all Andy's doing, was in 13 days. I knew that. I remembered the math in relation to my birthday because of a conversation I'd had with my father the previous summer. That's gonna be one hell of a fortnight, son, he'd growled. My father always growled. He spoke fluent brown bear. I reminded him that a fortnight was actually 14 days, and he'd taken one hand off the wheel of his truck to wave it's all the same, don't be a smart ass. So I'd shut up and received his wisdom. You and that girl getting married is just plain bonkers anyways. I hadn't argued. It was bonkers, but I didn't see a way around it. Andy had decided it was what came next, that it was time, and what's a rodent to do? Argue. Pointless. That way lay madness. Andy didn't do rhetoric. Andy leveled her eyes into an unblinking laser and burned her will into your wet, twitching corneas. Andy usurped God and common sense because she could, and besides, what else was I planning to do with my life? I didn't have plans that didn't include her. I hadn't for years. Not since the bus ride to Stearns when we were freshmen, and she'd put my hand under her sweater and her tongue in my mouth. I was studying classics at the same state university. She was doing her undergrad because not following her had never occurred to me. Dead languages don't have a home base. Booze is everywhere. Andy let me inside her. Andy tossed and I fetched. Dad was concerned that I'd flubbed the whole thing. I can't remember his reasons, but he wasn't wrong. Point of fact, my birthday was a cataclysm we'll call Exhibit B. When I left my breakfast nook, I walked into a mousetrap. Erin, who would forevermore be referred to as that girl, was nobody, and that's important to the story. I'd never seen her before my birthday, and I might never had met her at all if I hadn't made a series of mundane, alcohol-related blunders between my breakfast and my dooryard. The first was losing my lighter. You always have at least 3 lighters on you, Cam. Yeah, and now you know why. Halfway between Renee's scintillating presence and my external womb, I froze and fumbled my hands in a comical hand jive over all of my pockets and came up empty, which was unacceptable. An unlit cigarette hanging between expectant lips is the definition of despair as far as I'm concerned, like a dream deferred, blue balls of the spirit. I thought about pivoting back to the not quite a bodega, but shook away the notion. Because you never retrace your steps. That's right, I don't. I walk one way there and another way back, and I don't retrace my steps. I don't know why, and you know I don't know why. It's as close as I get to superstition. Now be still or I'll take a nap, and when Penny comes home, I'll be too damned engaged to tell you stories. I sighed, jammed the unlit cigarette to the pack. They never want to fit back in, and crossed the street to the little park Andy, and I used for people watching when we got frustrated with each other's company. On the other side of the park, there was a canal with a path that led back to our street, and it occurred to me that I might come across a smoker between here and there. If not, I could wait, but not waiting was better, and there'd be water if God willed it. I learned that from one of our local heroes. No need to footnote the reference. There were kids in the park, and by kids I mean peers, 20-something, in little pods doing what college kids do between classes. None of them were smoking, and I sighed. Everyone was getting healthy but me. They all looked sober and well-maintained, and I shook my head as if I were an old soul instead of their contemporary. Bastards, I thought, which was unfair. I felt like charging one of them like a madman, waving my arms and screaming in Latin, "Do you have a fire stick?" Which was the best translation for lighter I could think of. I thought about drifting into their company in silence, standing too close, maybe humming the ode to joy or a few bars of Carmina Burana just for shits and the proverbial giggles of it. I knew I was sloppy and disheveled, and that I reeked of whiskey. I knew I could make my eyes crazy if I wanted to, and I felt crazy, not scary crazy, but that hazy and pleasant flavor of unsound that erases inhibition and cause and effect from the equation. It was my birthday, goddammit. Doesn't anyone have a fire stick? I must have been lost in it for a minute or two, just staring into the future. I must have looked empty and hollow. I must have looked like something worth a check-in because someone chirped at me, and when I followed the sound, there was an elf in a bandana considering me with interest. She said, "You okay?" And my higher brain functions rushed back like a screen door on a spring. I think I smiled at her, but I remember thinking that she wasn't real because gelflings weren't real. I remember thinking that her backpack did a good job of hiding her wings. I didn't say anything at first, but she laughed anyway, like she read my mind. When I asked her about it hours later, she'd giggled and said that I looked like such a little boy she'd almost asked me if I'd lost my mommy. "It's my birthday and I've lost my lighter," is what finally leaked out of me, and she nodded as if that explained everything. She rummaged in a leather purse on a macrame strap and produced a pink disposable Bic. "Here you go. Happy birthday to you." 2 hours later, she was screaming my name and leaving long, bloody claw marks on my back. Happy birthday to me indeed. It happened quickly, my descent into infidelity. It zoomed me, rolled me up, and smoked me. It washed over me like a flood-pregnant river and took out my stilts. It was amazing and terrifying, and the terror turned me on and made me hungry and charming and powerful. Erin was too beautiful and too young to realize it. She was like a toy person, a horny cartoonist's idealization of the threshold between girlhood and sexual awakening. She was unblemished porcelain, her hair was messy corn silk, and her eyes were aquamarine ovals. She really was an elf, and I've always wanted to fuck an elf. Odd but true. Just like that, eh? No. Not just like anything. I lit my cigarette, said thank you, and when I tried to give her lighter back, she shook her head and told me to keep it. She had more. "Consider it a birthday present," she'd said, and then she just stood there smiling at me, and I didn't know what to do. She was captivating. She had gravity like a collapsing star, and I swear to God she was looking into me, seeing through me. She kept grinning at me, and I didn't have the strength to escape her grin. She said her name was Erin. I said I'm Cameron. She asked if I went to UMaine, and I said yes. She asked me what I was studying, and I told her. She sniffed the air like a tiny wolfhound and asked if I had any weed, and I said no, but I had a small liquor cabinet in my apartment. She seemed satisfied with that and asked how far away. 10-minute walk, I said, and she nodded. Then we were walking, and she took my hand and I held it. That was that. It was like witchcraft. It was witchcraft and a power exchange, and I didn't question it because I've never questioned the motives of assertive women, and because I was half drunk, and because it was my birthday. My second alcohol-fueled faux pas was believing that I deserved elf sex. It sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud, but at the time I was a man in a trance receiving the long-awaited boon from the gods. This was part of my hero's journey. It had to be. And who was I to deny what gifts the gods deign to give? Laying exhausted in my arms, hours later, she asked me where my girlfriend was, and I didn't bother with lying or being creative. "Fiancé, the wedding is in 13 days. She's in Portland till Wednesday afternoon. Doctor stuff." "Is she sick?" "No, she's pre-med, doing practical rotations at MMC." "That's cool. It's Monday, right? Today, I mean." "I think so. I lose track sometimes." "Yeah, me too. How old are you, Erin?" She laughed into my chest. "Does it matter?" "It might, a little bit. Maybe, I don't know." She had rolled over onto her stomach, her tiny little girl breasts invisible, pressed into the mess of my sheets. "I'm 17. Of course she was. I played it cool. Of course you did. "Skipping school today?" I laughed, and she rolled her eyes at me, flopped onto her back. She touched the loft's plaster ceiling and sighed. Can I stay until she gets back? I blinked. She had fucked me sober, but I hadn't had a chance to think about what came next yet. In fact, the enormity of what I'd just invited into my life hadn't fully registered. Not yet. I answered without thinking, and that was my third birthday fumble. Of course. So she stayed. I went to my evening classes. All of my classes were evening classes that semester. And when I came home, she was wearing Andy's bathrobe and fixing some sort of ramen tomato soup hybrid on the 2-burner electric stove. She flashed me a smile, and I poured myself a drink. I remember kissing her cheek while she stirred the mess of noodles. I reminded myself to do laundry before Andy came home. I remember putting my arms around her and feeling her tiny ass press back into me through the thin silk fabric. I remember she was naked beneath it. Little things. I didn't pause or think that I was doing something wrong. I was swept along in Aaron's wake. We played house, and I knew that game because Andy and I played it too. I knew I'd wash the dishes and wipe down the counter later because that was part of being domestic, and I was thoroughly domesticated. I got hard thinking about her pixie whiteness slipping beneath the imitation silk bathrobe that hung like a drape over her tiny body. I imagined her on top of me, my hands lifting her and lowering her. I shrugged and sipped my whiskey and stared at her, and I didn't care about anything. It was my fucking birthday. Mine, all mine, all mine. Andy called me a little before midnight and sang to me over the phone. She apologized for missing my big day and asked me what I'd been up to and if it had been a good day. She asked if I'd eaten shit food and bought myself porn and drank myself happy. She was good-natured, and I told her not to worry, that I'd kept myself busy. Erin was on her knees between my legs, making it hard to concentrate, but that was okay because Andy hated talking on the phone anyways. She said it lacked intimacy. She made her goodbyes in time for me to flood Erin's throat with every drop of self-entitled misogyny and bitterness I didn't know I had been collecting. We fell asleep on the floor under my bachelor blanket, and I didn't care. I slept like the dead, and there were no dreams. I can see the kitchen clock from where I'm perched on the living room couch, and it hits me that Erica is gone. I'm alone. I think one of two things has driven her into silence, and I don't care which one it is. Penny will be home in a half hour, and I've done nothing to prepare for her return. I stand up and stretch and check my hands for tremors, steady as a baby's heartbeat. Good. I circle the living room and pick up the crumbs I've dropped, take my dishes to the sink, and then wash them. I make a peanut butter bagel and wrap it in a paper towel. I set the wrapped bagel on the kitchen table and fetch myself a Red Bull. I step out onto the porch, smoke a cigarette, and regulate my breathing. In with the cold and clean, out with the damp heat and the dust. I survey the downstairs, find it in order, then move upstairs to the bathroom where I wash my face and brush my teeth. I wet my hair and pull it back using my fingers like a comb and blink at myself in the smudged mirror. Briefly. I look human, and that's the gift I want to give my daughter when she arrives. Humanity and a hug. 7. Animaniacal angst. Penny and Boo are good kids, which is amazing when you consider that they're reflections of their parents, one of whom left them behind to caretake the other. They both have sad eyes now that Erica is gone, and I can't seem to remember them otherwise. I know it was different. I have photographs on my phone that I can scroll through, Boo with cake on his nose on his 17th birthday. Penny dressed as her waifu last Halloween, excited beyond reason that her mother had allowed her to wear makeup outside the house. The two of them laughing wolf-toothed shiny grins and funny faces pressed into the confines of a snapshot, like a window to a past defined by both a mother and a father. I remember them being lighter, less serious, and I hate that. It happened so damned fast. One minute we were making anatomically correct snowmen in the front yard, Erica fuming. The kids were laughing. We had a snowball fight, and then we were eating lasagna and watching Emmett Otter's jug band Christmas. The next we were tossing out the dead flowers from Erica's wake and resequencing our lives. We started doing our own laundry by silent agreement, and Boo had moved his bed down to the cellar so we wouldn't hear him crying at night. Penny collected all of Erica's clothes and claimed them as her own. She didn't ask, and I didn't stop her. Instead, I'd taken my dead wife's jewelry box and makeup case and left them like an offering outside of Penny's door. The sacrifice wasn't discussed or even mentioned. It was absorbed, like our tears and our anger. It was swallowed by our damned New England pragmatism, and life just carried on. Boo withdrew from school, and I'd said nothing. Penny wore her mother's miniskirts, and I shadow, and I did nothing. They both aged a decade in a day, and now they're something new. But they're good kids, all things considered. Penny doesn't chase boys or let them chase her, and her grades are good. Her room is a tidal nightmare, but she respects the rest of the house and does her share of chores. She never complains. Boo is polite to a fault, sweet, tragically beautiful, and he doesn't inflict his pain on anyone else, at least not on his sister or his father. Neither ask me for anything, and I hate that because I'd give them anything I had. Not that I have much. I pay the bills, I pay for their phones, and I buy food, and I do my best to arrange it into decent meals. I try to smile, and I still make dad jokes and conversation. I dispense such advice as is appropriate and pertinent. I don't cry in front of them. I think they're afraid for me because as much as they miss their mother, they didn't rely on her to support their identity like they imagine I did. I think they're afraid that I'm broken now, and maybe I am. I do hear her ghost, not that I'd ever tell them such a thing. I don't hide the fact that I drink from them because they'd resent that, but I don't get sloppy in front of them. I still write and go to church and to the post office and therapy. I communicate with Penny's teachers. Sometimes I pass out on the couch, and sometimes I forget things, but that's just a symptom of being a widower, isn't it? Of not having a wife to cattle prod you when you need it. I'm doing my best, and I hope that they know that. I tell myself they do. I chant it like a mantra. I'm still in the bathroom when the door opens, and I can hear my daughter drop her backpack and her boots in the hallway. I can hear the jingle of her safety pins and neo-goth chains. I can hear her sigh as she takes off her bra and stuffs it in her backpack, free at last. Familiar sounds. I clear my throat and call down to her so she knows I'm home and conscious. She calls back that she's starving, and I yell down the stairs that there's a bagel in the kitchen with her name on it. She yells back a thank you. I yell a you're welcome. An outsider might wonder why I wouldn't just walk down the stairs and spare the shouting match. An outsider couldn't know how tenebrous the father-daughter dynamic can be when mother is permanently AWOL. We have roles to maintain for the sake of our sanity. Roles like gruff the dad and petulant the teen. We play them well. She's munching her bagel and scrolling through her phone when I appear in the kitchen, and we have the obligatory "how was school, Demi?" conversation. School was fine. School is always fine. And she asks me how I'm feeling, and I say fine and ask her why. Instead of answering, she says, "So what are you writing?" Which is completely off script. I open another Red Bull and take the seat across from her. She wrinkles her nose. "You shouldn't drink so many of those. They're nasty." "You're nasty," I chuckle, but she's right and she knows it. She also knows that harping on my liquor consumption or my chain smoking would be a dead end, so I let her have her victory and set the can aside. "Why do you ask, Princess?" She shrugs as if that's answer enough. I put on my serious dad face. "Something nasty." She raises one painted eyebrow. "New novel." "Nope, I'm in a short fiction phase. Besides, you didn't like the last one." "It was boring and weird." "Like me." "Like you." "Damn, that hurts. You've hurt my feelings." I put my hand over my heart, and she tosses a bagel crumb at me. "Since when do you care what I think?" That makes me wince before I can catch it, and she flushes. "Then what are you writing?" "I know you're writing, unless you're just talking to yourself, which would be weird." "Weirder than my last book." She nods, marginally. I sigh and she looks worried, like she's gone too far to beat a retreat, so I laugh and I smile and I lie through my teeth. I don't want her to retreat, I say. I'm just keeping a dream journal. Heather's idea, that's all. Heather is my hippy-dippy therapist, so it sounds legit. Penny nods and finishes her bagel. "Cool, I got homework, so later, Gator. Can we have burgers tonight?" She gives me a side hug and I say sure with bacon, and she's off. Smiling, which is good. I'll need to get ground beef at the store, but that's okay. Anything for the little princess. I think about the unfinished story about flesh-eating rain that I should be writing and shake my head. Later, Post-ghost. I keep a magnetic notepad on the fridge for shopping lists. Cartoon cats frame pastel-colored lines. It's cute. Dorky cute. Erica bought it for me a month or so before her accident, and I'll replace it when it's gone because, incongruity aside, it's become a fixture in my fixed widower narrative. I need lists, you see. Lists and roadmaps and calendars help mark the incremental steps between here and there. Oblivion repellent. Purgatorial life jackets and whatnot. I tear off a sheet and take a pen from the utility drawer beneath the silver cabinet. My hands are shaking a little, which is a warning sign. Danger, Will Robinson. Trouble ahead. And I nip that shit in the bud before it can reach critical mass. The Hannaford is a short walk across town, and I slip back into the cold, remembering my mittens and my list. Town is quieter and dimmer now that the sun is lower in the sky, and there are fewer cars, which is nice. In a few weeks, I'll be able to walk down the center line clear across town, but for now, I'm content with a decongested sidewalk. I need space to think, to sort out the few salient issues that whiskey hasn't dimmed or silenced. Penny wonders what I'm writing, and I lied to her face, which is a new crisis of character for me. I'm used to withholding information. That's just part of fatherhood, no biggie. Nobody wants or needs to see their parents completely naked and bloody-knuckled. She doesn't need to know my story or her mother's story or any of the tangential stories that weave together in nightmarish and garish ways, any more than I needed to know my parents' story. My parents were two-dimensional archetypes, and that's how it's supposed to be. Lying is different than not sharing, and I don't think I've ever actually lied to either of my children beyond the obligatory "I'm fine" when I'm not, which is my prerogative as a man to brandish freely. Penny asked me what I was writing, and I lied to her. I lied to her because the truth is dangerous in an entirely uncontainable way, and I need to remain in control if I'm going to finish what I've started. Lies are stupid and unsustainable and cancerous to the soul, but I need time and space to flush this nonsense out of me. I need to purge and cleanse my system. I need Erica to be satisfied enough with my confession that she'll leave me alone with my sorrow and my loss. I want to miss her legitimately and tenderly. I don't want to run from her or hide from her, and that's what I'm doing right now, and I hate it. Me, on the street, walking to the grocery store, alone in my head, safe from her whispering need, using my daughter as an excuse to escape after lying to her about her mother's unfinished business and her father's sins. Just getting burger meat for dinner, dear. I'm not hiding from Mom's ghost. Fuck no, that's ridiculous, pet. Your mother's dead. May she rest in peace, remember? She went on a long car ride into eternity and she didn't leave enough pieces behind to piece together. Humpty Dumpty 2021, Black Ice Edition. The casket was closed. I gave you her jewelry box, and sometimes Daddy cries, but that's all right. Daddies cry. We buried you, Erica. Why make me into a liar? I wonder sometimes if I summoned her without realizing it. I wonder if she's just grief and guilt made manifest and given a voice. Maybe she's a goddess, and I grieved her into existence with my tears and my pain as an act of worship. Maybe, but I don't think so. I don't think that I have that kind of power.